I have read a lot of bad comic book issues and comic book stories in my time. I've been covering the industry for the past 6 years. I've seen lots of highs. I've seen lots and lots of lows. We're talking like Batgirl 50 level, terrible storytelling, Tim Drake, Robin, terrible storytelling, Iceman from Cena Gray, some of the worst things you've ever read in your life. We're talking like New Mutants Lethal Legion by Charlie Jane Anders, one of the worst comic book series I've ever read. There's been some really bad stuff I've read, and I've been forced to read, but I do it for you guys because I love every one of you, and I do want to point out some of the things that are ailing the comic book industry. But this week, I did come across what I have to consider, at least for the moment, and this isn't hyperbole. Sometimes I will say things that are probably a little bit too far out there, but this is the worst comic book issue I've ever read in my life. Fire and Ice, Welcome to Smallville, issue number 5. Joanne Starer, Natasha Bustos on art on this particular issue. It does not have a plot. It doesn't really have a point. It just exists maybe to exist. The best way to describe this comic book is...
that is one big pile of shit.
Like, it's that bad. There's nothing particularly redeeming about this comic book. This is the best way I could describe what went into this particular issue and the way that it was produced. Let's say you're going to visit your wife's sister, and she's like a 42-year-old wine aunt, no kids, got a t-shirt on that says, I've had 10 abortions or whatever. And the kid leaves his Mad Libs, right? Remember Mad Libs? We used to get them at the book fair and all that kind of stuff. I love Mad Libs. This is what that particular person, what their Mad Libs would be, except they decided to publish it as a comic book because I don't really know. It doesn't really do any justice to the Justice League International. It does no justice to Fire and Ice, the characters. It doesn't really do any justice to Superman lore. It is occurring in Smallville and does contain Ma Kent, and we've seen Crypto in here, so we are seeing Superman characters and whatnot. You can tell the author has no awareness of who the characters are, their motivations, or what should be going on. And it's just a bunch of random stuff happening within the comic book. And I imagine some of you are rolling your eyes like, it can't be that bad. Well, au contraire, mon frere, I'm about to explain to you just how bad it can be. The book opens up, and I guess in the previous issue, this lady named Tam, who's a hairstylist, decided to hook up with this other chick named Honey. And when she woke up, Honey was gone, and the salon, I guess, was on fire. So then the character Fire decides to save her and actually removes her from the building, a brief moment of actual heroism in this entire comic book series. Ice, the character that's basically been the only somewhat normal character within this entire comic book series, just starts absolutely berating her because she assumes that Fire started the fire. Felt a little bit too on the nose. No one actually knows what happened here. What have you done, B? Not now. How about not ever again? If you want to ruin your life with reckless behavior, fine, but you're not dragging me down with you. I get it. Everything is my fault. You're unbelievable. Yeah, I'm never going to hear the end of this from you or Superman. She never even asked if she's okay. What's going on here? Doesn't really feel like real friendship behavior. But perhaps when chicks are hanging out without the presence of male companions, this is really how they treat each other. I'm not really sure. But that's like the thing that starts the comic book out. It's kind of key to what happens, I guess, because they do mention the fire further on into the comic book. But then it gets really weird because Lobo showed up in the last issue and banged the shit out of Fire. And then he was with all these villains that were doing like a YouTube contest show that Fire had created, I guess, because she wants notoriety, but she doesn't want to get it by being a hero. I guess she wants to get it by being an influencer because people who don't write comic books don't understand heroism or whatever. And Lobo, the main man, decided to rob all of them and steal their pie on the way out. So the villains got mad. So Grodd's transgender sister, Linka, shows up to this bar that's run by a handicapped guy and says, "Give me your money." And he says, "Finally, a woman who knows what she wants," trying to defuse the situation. "Look, if you're here to rob me, there's not a whole lot I'm going to be able to do about it." Obviously, he is in a wheelchair, and this is an enormous talking gorilla, transgender talking gorilla at that. "But maybe I can buy you a drink first." Now, remember, the gorilla is trying to rob this guy that's in a wheelchair. Fire intervenes, I guess, to save the day as the good guy. "Don't do that, dude. Don't use sex as a weapon." That's like the weirdest line ever. The guy is actually, I guess, trying to defuse the situation by being somewhat charming. And then she says, "Linka has feelings, And Linka says, I do. Although I do think that particular joke would have been more effective with a question mark, perhaps selling the fact that this enormous transgender gorilla was actually robbing a man in a wheelchair. And then he says, she's trying to steal from me, making perfect sense within the context of the actions that are going on. And Fire says, you're the only bar in town and you're charging $8 for a beer. That's theft. And then the gorilla says, amen, because now Linka, who didn't decide to rob this man because he charged $8 for beer, they decided to rob him because the main man stole their pie or whatever, is now justified in doing so because he's the bad guy because he charges too much for beer. Even though he is in a wheelchair, he can't really defend himself in the situation, obviously from a ginormous gorilla anyway. And I imagine his medical expenses associated with being in that wheelchair and the maintenance on the wheelchair is also pretty damn expensive. And he probably needs that money, but he's the bad guy here because he tried to diffuse the situation with a little bit of charm, I guess. And those are the level of jokes in this comic book. And I do think this is supposed to be, I don't know if it's a parody or if it's satire. Like I said, it's more along the line of Mad Libs because the jokes don't really work and nothing really makes sense throughout the comic book. Here's another example of a joke. Tam was really upset because Honey left her and is now assuming that she actually burnt down the salon. And she said, why did you do it, Honey? Look, I'm not ready for a relationship. And then Tam says, you could have just said that. And Honey says, trust me, it's better this way. Tam says, you cost me my job. But while this is happening, all sorts of funny things are happening. We get Ambush Bug who's stealing potatoes. Come on, if you don't move quick, you're going to miss all the potatoes. And then he throws a potato at somebody. We've got Hercules or whatever. No one wants potatoes because this is all hilarious. And the pussycat guy, come here, babies, come on down, bring daddy his toys. Because, see, the cats have diamonds on their collars. And then the cats jump on his face. And he says, please, babies, my eyes. My eyes? This is absolutely hilarious. As I said, this is a deranged Wyatt Ant in Arrested Development filling out a 5-year-old's Mad Libs tablet or whatever. These are the jokes that are going on in here. And then just like all sorts of really weird stuff happens throughout this comic book. This has never been hinted at or anything in the previous issues. All of a sudden, Rocky, who's another lesbian in Smallville, Kansas, because the entire town is inhabited by lesbians, and she wants to hook up with Ice. All of a sudden, she's got a weird grin on her face, and then she turns into Poison Ivy or something, and then we get some type of explanation of why this is happening. They actually had a mask among their belongings that someone took, and in that mask, you had Kui 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 Island, which is a living island, kind of like Krakoa, who overtakes Rocky and turns her into some type of monster or whatever. And perhaps the island monster thing that overtook Rocky is the one that started the fire. I do not know where this came from. It just kind of weirdly happens in the middle of Smallville because random things need to keep happening because I think that's the joke. I think the joke is everything is so random here. It's just so bad. And this is the art that this comic book deserves because the art looks terrible as well. And along the way, for some reason, Ice tells the story about when she was a kid and her mother, I believe, was eaten by or maybe was seduced by some guy named Crave, who apparently is some type of cannibal or whatever. And then the last page reveal, as they're working through the beanstalks, that Kui 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 Island, who's taken over Rocky, has infected the city. As they're overcoming that and getting to her phone, we see Martha Kent is trying to call on a FaceTime to reveal that Crave, I guess, is actually at her house and that she needs Fire and Ice to come and save her. And you're going, that's not an ordinary Martha right there. That's actually Superman's mom. Do we think that Superman is not going to come to his mother's aid? Like, it's so weird. Why would she want Fire and Ice, who have proven to be completely inept and unheroic throughout the entirety of the comic book series itself? We watched Fire try to murder a woman for peacefully protesting outside of a drag show in Smallville, and she wants them to come save her rather than her son, Superman, or her grandson, John Kent, the gay Superman, or her adopted grandson, Superboy, Connor Kent, or her two new grandkids, Otho and Otho, who are also Superboy and Supergirl or something like that. Her adoptive niece, Supergirl, Kara Zora. Like, there's so many members of the Superman family that could come and take care of this, and would if Martha Kent was in danger. And that's why this writer is absolutely stupid. And this is the comic book that she came up with. And it's I don't know, it's very perplexing. I'm only giving you a brief glimpse, a brief insight into all the stupidity that goes into Fire and Ice Welcome to Smallville issue number 5. Maybe the best way to describe this comic book is internalized retardation. I don't know. There's like, I don't know what to say about this. Every single thing about this comic book fails. There's not a plot. There's tons of jokes. None of them really land. All the events that happen come out of nowhere. Every single girl in the city of Smallville is a lesbian. And the art just is absolutely terrible. And it does fit the book. And you're just left there wondering, what the fuck is going on here? I feel like I'm in Wonderland or something. And I'm just thinking, oh, none of this stuff makes sense. But this is what DC Comics have become. And this is kind of what they are. And I can complain about Marvel not having very many good series. And DC has more like good series. They do have Green Lantern. They do have Action Comics, although Philip Kennedy Johnson's off of there. You know, Superman's been not bad. There's a few decent series out there from DC, and there really aren't many from Marvel. But Marvel doesn't even have anything as bad as Fire and Ice Welcome to Smallville. They don't have anything as bad as Alan Scott the Green Lantern. They don't have anything as bad as what Tim Drake Robin was. As a DC fan, you're like, it can't get worse. Like I always thought it can't get worse than Batgirl 50 from Cecil Castellucci. And yet they always prove me wrong. Like they prove me, yes, you can do worse than what you thought the worst thing possible was at the time. And I imagine over the next year or two, they will do something worse than Fire and Ice Welcome to Smallville number 5. But I don't want to discover it. I don't want to be there when it happens. And that's just kind of the place that DC Comics have put me in. And just it's really, really weird. And I don't know what happened to this publisher, but here we are. This is what they're publishing at this time. And I will stand by this one. This is the worst single comic book issue I've ever read in my life. There's nothing redeeming about it whatsoever. There's almost a moment of charm from the dude in the wheelchair, but even that was ruined just by terrible writing throughout the comic book. So that's what it is. If you're tired of stuff like that, and you want to be a part of the conversation and community that wants to point you in the right direction, I do a lot of stuff on the Patreon talking about great stuff. Not only the good stuff now, obviously, that I do with Jim on the Hot or Not podcast, where we talk about all the new stuff from DC, Marvel, and Indies, but we're also going to be starting the Comics Guilds next week, doing Miller World beginning to end. We're going to be doing Planetary, and we're just trying to find something together that's good and this like wasteland of terrible comic books right now. If you have not checked out the Patreon, I do believe there's some stuff there that you will probably enjoy. There is a link in the video description, and I do think you should check it out.